We're headed to the movies in this episode of Won't You Be My Gamer. We're joined by Hollywood historian Mark Wanamaker, and we are talking Hollywood scandals of old. We're talking murder, bribery, connections to the mob. It's gonna get pretty seedy in here. Okay, well, we're gonna have to clear that with the PBS censors, I think. Nicole, what are we playing?
We are playing Hollywood Animal. It is like a zoo tycoon from movie studios.
Hollywood scandals. I feel like we have shows like E! True Hollywood Stories. We love them, you know, gossip magazines.
E! True Hollywood, I did 20 of those.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff did you cover on E! True Hollywood Stories?
Well, that's the point, is that a lot of people don't know about the old Hollywood scandals. They know about Marilyn Monroe, maybe, but what about the history of all this that goes way back? That's my specialty.
So where do we start then?
And let's go back to the time of the William Desmond Taylor murder. I'm going there because that was really one of the first.
Okay.
Was he murdered, or was this an accident?
Okay.
Now, who was William Desmond Taylor? Let's go there quickly. William Desmond Taylor was a film director in the early days, in the teens, and into the early 20s.
Yeah, I'm just adding him to our wanted old Hollywood scandal board here.
1922 is when he
1922?
died.
Okay, I'll put that on here.
And that's just a few years before I'm opening my studio. This is 1929.
You're running a movie studio.
You know,
game.
but before you start a studio, you have to read a lot of paperwork, is what I'm learning.
And are you starting the studio by legitimate means?
Yes, it is a bankrupt studio that I am taking over. So there's kind of like, you know, a husk of a studio that I am inserting myself into. So not the most ethical.
There were many studios at the beginning of the film industry that went bankrupt, and people came in and took it over. They took it over not just for the facility, the building, but they already had a library. And this is a typical thing with MGM. When it was purchased by Turner and others, they bought the libraries. Same thing with Fox Studio. I actually work for Fox Studio now. And basically, Disney came in and bought all the intellectual property of the studio, took it over, and removed it from the old lot, which is now the husk. And now a new company was formed to create a whole new studio at this old Fox lot. Same thing as what you're doing.
Yeah. Nicole, you're part of the problem.
I had a feeling.
We can finish with William Desmond Taylor, but I have to tell you about the Robert Horner story
Oh.
and his studio.
Should I add him on here as a
I
scandal?
think you should.
Okay.
He started his studio about 1923, about 24. He was a Poverty Row studio. What is that? Poverty Row was a section of Hollywood, Beechwood Drive and Sunset, which later became the Columbia Studio, which was populated by little tiny studios, little ones. And how were they funded? They would make deals with stars, for example. Robert Horner would find a star, a woman or a man, who their careers were on the ebb. And so he'd go to them and say, look, if you fund your own film, I will make it for you. And sometimes when the film was done, he couldn't pay back that star. And so the banks were after him and all this because he couldn't afford to really pay anybody back because the film didn't do that great. But the interesting thing about Robert Horner was he had no legs. He lost his legs as a child in Chicago in the 19th century, somehow survived.
Robert Horner, it sounds like he was just kind of doing whatever he wanted.
He did whatever he wanted, but then the banks were after him and other creditors because he was like a pyramid scheme. He was getting the money, making the film, and getting the money back from the distributors, but sometimes not enough money came to pay back his creditors.
I don't want to make any unfounded accusations here, but do we think that maybe Nicole's studio might be a little Poverty Row studio?
I'm gonna go with yes. So when I inherited this studio, I also took on a film that was already shot but not in post. So in this game, you get to have, you make choices, and not only to choose kind of what film you work on and who you hire, but like there's some ethical decisions as well. So here's a person who I work with who is talking about addiction, and they want to have me make a change. And so I can either be like, yes, we are gonna control the amount of substances that come in. This is a drug-free zone. Or I can say, nah, it's cool. It's the 20s. Here's drugs. So I'm gonna say no.
What do you think they would have said, Mark, at that time?
First of all, at the time, there was a drug problem in Hollywood, all the way back to the teens. Always has been. There's nothing new today.
Okay, well then I'm going to say no. Drugs it is.
Wow. Wow.
For Hollywood, for history.
Well, we've talked a little bit about it with Robert Horner's practices, but, Nicole's doing a lot of funny money stuff. Were there other examples of kind of these like illicit financial activities happening
Yes.
the way that studios ran and movies were made?
There was always mob. Always mob. We hear
Okay.
about the mob in the 40s, 30s even.
I'm going to add the mob to our list.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Desmond Taylor.
Yes.
So what was his story?
Pretty much the first real Hollywood murder scandal. And Desmond Taylor was a very important director in his day. He had Mabel Normand and Mary Miles Minter he mentored. They were two very important silent film stars. Mabel Normand was with the Keystone Film Company of Charlie Chaplin and all that. Mary Miles Minter was with the American Film Company of Santa Barbara. All these people were doing westerns and mysteries and action pictures, and he would be their mentor and would teach them how to do this and that, and they relied on him. And the problem is that Mary Miles Minter, was very insecure, and people thought maybe she was taking drugs or drinking too much or whatever it is, but she just relied too much on him, leaning on him too much. And she showed up one night, 1922, at his bungalow court where he lived in East Hollywood. He was doing his taxes at the time, and she barges in wearing her big fur coat, and all this. She's gorgeous and all this stuff. And he's not, what are you doing here? I'm busy, And she just couldn't take that. And she borrowed her mother's gun and came there not to kill him, but to pretend to commit suicide in front of him. She took out the gun, like to her head. He saw this, went nuts, jumped up to grab the gun. I believe this version of the story. I'll tell you the other versions. He tried to grab the gun, and she immediately hugged him. And the gun went off in his back, trajectory of the bullet, straight up and out like this. He fell flat on his back, paralyzed. He wasn't killed.
Oh, okay.
It hit his spinal cord. And he was there bleeding out, and she went over him with her blonde hair, crying, and he's trying to tell her, do something. And she then gets her coat on, puts her hat on, and runs away with the gun. Next morning, he was found by his brother-in-law or whatever.
Alive still?
Dead. He was dead. So then comes the idea. He was the head of the Drug Commission for Hollywood. He was the head of it. Immediately, must be mob drug murder. Next one is that Mary Minter's mother, Charlotte Shelby, there you go.
That's a tongue twister.
Yeah, that's
It
a
is
tough
a
one.
tongue twister. It was her gun. And it was said that she was going there to confront him because he's fooling around with her daughter. He is doing something. He happened to be gay, okay, on top of everything. No, he was the mentor to them. So these are the three stories: the murder by the mother, she was head of the drug board, so the mob bumped him off, or it was the accident. I believe the accident because I saw the morgue report showing the trajectory of the bullet.
Was there a trial? What was the aftermath?
It wasn't no trial because there was no suspects. It was a big inquest.
Okay.
And that's typically of what most Hollywood scandal was. Nothing really was as insidious as just an accident or something of this nature.
But when we blow them up in this salacious way for headlines.
To this day, they still talk about the murder of William Desmond Taylor. It doesn't matter if it was an accident because people want this salacious story.
So
they want that.
On that subject, then, would you say, like, obviously there are these big scandals. We were able to make a show, True Hollywood Story, these scandals. But is it kind of a misconception that Hollywood is as scandalous as it is presented to be?
It is a misconception. It's not. Most people in Hollywood wake up at 4 a.m. to get to the set by 6. They're exhausted by the end of the day. They do party on the weekend or something. And yes, many of them were crazy and nuts and all this business. But generally speaking, no. But the point is, it's Hollywood. People want the scandal. There were fan magazines since the early teens talking about where they lived, how they dressed, what hair that made up, what designer they went to, and what nightclub they went to, and did they drink or not drink? They were smoking this. I mean, on and on and on. This was what Hollywood wanted to this day.
Do you think that the obsession with celebrity sometimes drives some of this?
Absolutely right. Of course, right now we have entertainment television that was the big deal. Now it's TMZ. TMZ is doing exactly what they did in the teens, talking about this thing, or Mabel Normand, what she was up to, who was sleeping with who, and who was taking drugs. All the same. Nothing has changed. Why? It's all publicity for the films. That's why it's not curtailed. That's why it's encouraged. It's all publicity.
Nicole and I, we follow a lot of these stories, this news.
I read a lot of celebrity gossip.
Read a lot of celebrity news.
Yeah.
Are some of these relationships, are they PR relationships? Are they fake? Like, how much is being manufactured for us?
There were many these PR relationships.
Does that go way back?
Well, it goes way back, and
Okay.
and
I'm gonna add that to our board then. PR relationships.
it had a lot to do with people being gay in the industry. At that time, it was a stigma, and people did not want people to know that they were. So they were given wives that they married.
And were these directives from the studio?
Yes,
Like, you need to do this.
Yes.
You're contractually.
That's right. Haynes was a very important actor who was married and all this kind of thing. And eventually it got out, and there was a lot of backlash to this. And he decided, I'm quitting now. I'm becoming an interior designer. And he ended up designing all the famous stars' homes and everything, 20s and 30s and 40s and this and that.
Good for him.
Okay. Marion Davies was one of the great stars of the time, and she was the mistress to William Randolph Hearst. It was known that she was. The wife was still around, but not with them together, of course. Millicent was William Randolph Hearst's wife, and they had separate lives. And I'm telling you, Marion Davies was the kindest, sweetest, wonderful, talented person ever. If you don't know who she was, please Google her and see who she was.
Would we know her from any particular work or anything like that?
She did several sound films, but no, we will not know that. She's pretty much forgotten, really remembered as being William Randolph Hearst's mistress,
Okay.
and of course involved with the scandal of the death of Thomas Ince. And it's very important. There was a film, The Cat's Meow, was done a few years ago, all about this. It was all folklore and salacious, of course, not real. But what happened in the case of William Randolph Hearst on the yacht, Hearst Yacht, in which Thomas Ince was taken off. Thomas Ince was one of our most important pioneering film producers, moguls. He's the one that built what we now know as Sony Studio today and the Culver Studios today. He built all that, but he died at 43 years old at home in front of everyone, but he was supposedly shot by William Randolph Hearst. He was not shot by William Randolph Hearst, but it didn't matter. The stories came up that Hearst was hated because Hearst was a publishing magnate, and they
want to take him down. Yeah,
they want to take him down, exactly, and they use Ince for this. But who was supposed to be the target of the shot? Charlie Chaplin, who was on the yacht. So Chaplin is supposed to be the target. So everybody gave conflicting statements when they got off the yacht. Well, I don't know. I wasn't on the yacht. I mean, it was proven he was. I mean, everybody was scared to death of the press.
Like a real life Knives Out or something.
It was exactly. See how it's all, you can relate to it today.
Yeah, it never changes, I guess.
No.
Are you making enemies in this game?
Yeah, so an actress just asked me if I will let her go on voice rest for another 3 months.
We're not going to be able to do that,
I said
are we?
yes, because none of my films are in production yet. So
And you only make silent movies.
you know,
So she can take the voice
I
rest.
think we're talking.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
All right, let's move on now to, I think, Thelma Todd, which relates to you.
Another scandal?
Yes.
All right, add it to the board.
And Thelma Todd was a Hal Roach star, comedian. Hal Roach Studios, which was the studios of Laurel and Hardy, our gang. Thelma Todd was the female comedic character there, and she was absolutely lovable. They loved her. The whole public loved her. And she had her own comedy series of feature films. She was at a party and came back home late at night, and she can't get into the house. It's locked or something, and then she was drunk, and she couldn't get in, and then she decided, well, I'll get into the car and I don't know, she was going to go back to Hollywood. So she gets into the car and forgets to open the garage door. I mean, she's like sitting in there thinking, am I going to go? Turns on the engine. In those days, those are tanks, these giant cars with carbon monoxide that would just kill you in 2 seconds. And that's what happened to her.
Wow.
But
A mistake.
a mistake. But she was in Hollywood hobnobbing with some of the gangsters at the time. Everybody hobnobbed with gangsters. They were all over the place. The Bugsy Siegel story is later on.
Yeah, it sounds
but
like
the
they-
same thing.
Sounds like they were pretty ubiquitous. Like you couldn't go
Yes.
down Sunset.
No, they're
without-
everywhere. They're
Yeah.
everywhere. So people thought maybe she was murdered by the mob because she knew too much, like Marilyn Monroe. It's the same story all over again. So my point about it is she was in the midst of making some films for Roach, very popular, important films. Hal Roach actually went to the site and saw her there. They tried to fix it somehow. How are we going to fix it? What are we going to say? She's dead now. We don't have her. How are we going to replace her? And they had to finish the film because investors invested in these films. They can't just put it on the shelf and let it die. So sometimes they went to independent investors. Sometimes they went to a bigger studio like MGM. Hal Roach went to MGM to help fund the rest of his studio. MGM would then make the Laurel and Hardy films and the Thelma Todd films, whatever it was going to be next. So your little studio could be one of those studios that basically took on a project that was already in the making and insert another star that you might want to cultivate.
Is that what you're angling to do, Nicole?
I think so. And right now, I am a journalist wants to go on tour of our studio. And one of my people in my press office said, hey, that's probably not a good idea. We don't want them dealing with any of our more less savory actions. And so what we're going to do is pay an actress to give him a tour and just be like, look at the trees.
I love it.
Yeah, so
I like it.
Yeah,
That's
feast
what
or
we're
peep
gonna
is
do.
this way. Don't look over there.
Now, the press was very difficult. We had columnists that were very powerful. Hedda Hopper, Luella Parsons. They started early on in the teens. They worked for Hearst, they worked for others. And over the years, they could be extremely critical, like what you're speaking about now. To bring them on your lot and you're not prepared is death, kiss of death. They could say anything and just say, the star that you're picking, we don't like her. She already has a reputation of fooling around with all these men or drugs or something, and could kill your film.
To the opposite of that, was there ever any like palms greased? Like, oh, you write a good thing about our studio or
Nobody could
star?
prove that.
Okay.
But of course it happened.
Can I add it to the scandal board? Do you
Yes.
think it's okay?
Yeah.
I put maybe some loose bribery.
Oh yeah.
But I am starting my next movie. It's called Meow Meow. It's going to be a romance action thriller set in a fantasy kingdom. I'm casting it now. I've set up my movie studio in a way that like we are going to be pumping out some
But who
films.
knows how many lives were ruined to make Meow Meow?
But how many lives are going to be created because of it?
What?
That's your ethical issue, and that's Robert Horner's issue. He had them do whatever it was. He had no insurance, no
Whatever it
nothing.
takes.
Here's an ethical issue. The mayor of Los Angeles likes the movies I'm putting out, wants me to make a movie for his daughter to star in. Is that before we wrap up, is that the type of thing that politicians would get involved?
Yes, absolutely.
And should we allow it?
And another thing is they would give like a honorary chief of police badge to some of them. And
Chief
they
of
would,
police?
Yeah, in other words, they would be driving recklessly or whatever, and he'd show his badge, and they would let the star go.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna add police corruption to
Oh,
our list
tons
too.
of it. Lots of police corruption, sheriff as well. Sheriff Biscaloos, which was our sheriff in the 1920s and 30s, he gave a lot of these badges out.
Nicole, are you ready to make your movie?
Yeah, I'm just renewing some contracts with Petey Pizza, the famed actor, and
What?
I got to name him.
She sounds like Robert Horner.
Yeah, she is really invoking
Robert
a lot of
Horner.
Robert
Yeah,
Horner
and
With
here.
legs.
Roberta
and,
Horner over here.
and my
Roberta
studio's
With
doing
a-
pretty
yeah, a lot of legs.
good.
She has pretty long legs.
Let's do one last movie.
Uh-oh, legal. You never want to hear from
No.
legal.
Oh, legal.
Okay, so this is an issue with our previous owner of the studio, who I have, taken over. You know what? I'm gonna say there's an agreement. Let's honor it. Or I can say they picked the wrong guy. they can take their little piece of paper and shove
You
it.
might make your movie faster if you pick the second one.
You know what? Elise was an advocate for the second one.
What?
So
No, I wasn't. I was
Okay,
just
so
stating
now
that.
I'm going to trial. All right. So I didn't anticipate that. Can I just pay?
Oh, I got $500,000. What is that amongst, studio executives? Mark, thank you so much for joining us. We want you to come back next week and talk about more with us, hear about your history in particular, because you have just touched so many aspects of this town, and
I'm intertwined
you're
in this town.
part of the
Yeah.
history now.
Yes.
Nicole, I'm excited to see whether you can evade prison.
I think I'm going to invade prison and check your local theaters for Meow Meow, coming this fall in 1929.
Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel and watching. How can they continue to support and donate and make sure that Won't You Be My Gamer exists?
By heading to pbssocal.org/gamer and make a donation. We are so appreciative of any amount you can contribute. It's how we're able to do this, and thanks in advance.
And Mark, what work can people find and check out for you?
All you have to do is just Google me.
Okay,
Mark
Wan-
Wanamaker, Bison Archives. Listen to my podcast readings on the Google Podcast.
Wherever you get your
International
podcasts
Market.
from, yeah.
And it's on all platforms. And basically, it's not a podcast in the sense. It's a podcast reading. It's a produced, short, 10 to 20 minutes on forgotten people of the film industry, like Alice Guy Blanchet, the first woman director ever. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company, first black film company ever, with Noble Johnson, one of my heroes, one of the great stars, who was close friends with Lon Chaney Sr., and they developed the early makeup for films. And then there's the female pioneer action heroes of the silent film era. All the Angelina Jolies you can ever imagine between 1912 and 1920, who made as much money as they make today. They were super important, famous, and forgotten. That's part of what these podcast readings are about.
Thank you so much. We love Hollywood history here on the show. We're excited to learn more. We'll see you in the pictures.
Oh, I lost.
Oh, you can pay that.
Yeah.